I'm just having my glass of water to get me ready.
Ciao bambini.
Good morning and welcome to our whole school assembly.
Hola!
Let's get some learning on.
Welcome to another day of home learning.
What time is it?
So we're going to work out the volume of this spring roll.
And they're all over the floor.
I consist of 95% water.
We learn grammar through the coolest tool, music.
Super hot.
Godt arbejde i dag, elever.
I just need to keep up. I'm so proud of you. Well done.
Hi everyone, and welcome to today's SOFA session, specifically put together for you, the education community in Scotland. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. I'm Dean, Head of Education Adoption for Europe, the Middle East and Africa at Google. Now, I know what you're thinking, there's no sofa, but whilst we're not sat on one, we do invite you to sit back and relax on yours whilst we hear from our guests today. I'm really looking forward to being able to see many of you in person again soon. But for now, we're live from the broadcast studio here at Google's London HQ. And I'm joined by my colleague, Ollie.
Hi everyone, I'm Ollie, a solutions engineer, also working with schools and education systems all across Europe, Middle East and Africa. Now, Dean and I were actually both secondary school teachers, and we are passionate about supporting you to make the most meaningful use of Google for Education's tools.
Now, it's great to see so many of you here. I can see Ryan and Susan, Rachel and Steve in the live chat. Please do leave questions and comments throughout the session today. And joining us remotely from our team is AJ Pathak, our National Account Manager for Scotland, who will give us the lowdown on today's event. So over to you, AJ.
Thanks, Dean. Thank you for your kind words. And hello and welcome to the SOFA session. It's great to be here today. Unfortunately, I'm unable to be live with my fellow Googlers in the studio due to COVID restrictions, but luckily through the use of technology, I'm still able to take part. But I'm totally jealous, Dean and Ollie, the studio looks amazing. I would like to also thank our fantastic guests from Scottish local education authorities. This includes Robert Quigley and Tanya Mackey from Highland Council, Karen MacLeod from South Lanarkshire Council, Ian Vosser from Tablet Academy Scotland, and Michael Conlon from XMA. We're facing exciting times in Scotland with the recent government pledge to go one-to-one with devices across the country. This will be a massive change as each child will have their own individual device, and there'll also be huge infrastructure upgrades across schools and local authorities in Scotland. Google for Education are here to support you on your digital journey during these exciting times. During the next 45 minutes, we'll be sharing important updates from Google for Education, and you'll also get a chance to hear from our key Scottish educators about the journey they've had, and we'll also discuss their plans for the future. Google for Education has made many new updates to our products. We're excited to have some of our favourites here to share with you today. Let me pass you back to Dean, who will be taking us through some of the latest updates from Google Workspace for Education.
Thanks, AJ. Now, there's so much we could share that I've picked just 4 of my favourite new features in Google Workspace for Education to share with you today. So firstly, before the end of the year, we'll be launching the ability to schedule assignments across multiple classrooms at once. Now, I think this is super helpful if, for example, you're teaching multiple classes of S2 science, and you'll be setting the same work for all of those classes. You no longer need to choose between the convenience of either scheduling or posting to multiple classes. You can now just do both. Next, when you're logged in and completing a Google form, your progress is now automatically saved as a draft for 30 days. That means if you can't complete a form or you need to switch devices, you don't have to start over again the next time you open the form. I think this might be really helpful if you want to create quizzes with longer paragraph-style questions for your students that they can come back to. Next, we're launching Smart Canvas, a new product experience that delivers the next evolution of collaboration for Google Workspace. I'm really excited about this one, and we've started by introducing 2 new features already: Smart Chips and Templates. Now, to use Smart Chips, you simply type the @ symbol to see a list of recommended people, files, and meetings right there inside your document. You just hover over a Smart Chip to get more information about the item. And in that same list, you'll also see templates. Now, we've started with a meeting notes template, with more coming soon, including things like topic voting and project tracking table templates. Now, speaking of projects, also don't forget that we recently launched the ability to add checklists in Docs, which I think is perfect for students working on projects and groups to help them keep track of everything. And finally, for those of you with the Teaching and Learning Upgrade or Education Plus editions, you'll soon be able to live translate captions in Google Meet from English into Spanish, Portuguese, French, or German. And those are just a few of the recent and upcoming features in Google Workspace for Education. I really recommend taking a look at the recent releases support page, and we'll drop a link for that in the chat now. Now, let's take a moment to hear from some of our education experts that AJ just mentioned about their thoughts on these updates. So we have Tanya and Ian here. Now, Tanya, you do a lot of work with teachers in the Highlands. What do you think they're going to be most excited about from these updates?
I'm actually looking forward to the Smart Canvas being introduced. I'm loving the checklists in Google Docs, but the way that we're going to be able to use project tracker tables to support collaborative working, assign tasks. So I can see that being quite a popular feature. So brilliant.
I'm really looking forward to that as well. And I know collaborating with the team here internally as well, I think it's going to be really helpful to be voting on ideas and things. And Ian, previously you were working with South Lanarkshire, now with Tablet Academy working with educators across the country. What do you think people are going to be looking forward to?
Hi, Dean. I know teachers are really excited about the ability to schedule across multiple classrooms. I think in terms of that forward planning, being able to know that you want to put something out to the same groups of learners or groups of classes, and being able to plan that in advance and know that it will go at a scheduled time is going to be really, really useful, helping teachers with their workflow. So very, very excited about that coming on stream.
Definitely, yeah. I think you're not the only one excited as well. That was one of our top feature requests from teachers through Classroom. So if you ever have any feedback when you're using Classroom, just click on that question mark in the bottom left of the screen and leave it there, because the team really does take a look at every piece of feedback that's left there. Now, it's not just Workspace, there's also plenty coming to Chrome as well. So let's hand over to Ollie to learn about those updates.
Thanks, Dean. So as you mentioned, there are loads of exciting updates to Chrome and Chromebooks I'm really excited to share with you today. First up, we've added a brand new Chrome Insights report, which allows admins to really easily see when your managed Chromebooks will be reaching their automatic update expiration date. So this will really help you as schools with planning for when you need to update your device fleet. And remember that new Chromebooks now come with up to 8 years of automatic updates. This means that schools' devices will remain safe and secure and receive regular feature updates for even longer. And I'm also really pleased that students and educators will now be able to log into their managed Chromebooks with a 6-digit PIN instead of always needing to type in their account password. So I know this will make logging into the Chromebooks much, much easier and faster, especially for your younger students who may struggle with typing passwords. And Chromebooks now also have screen recording built in without the need for any third-party software. So you can record your screen and your voiceover directly from the screenshot tool on a Chromebook. We know that educators create screen recordings to model tasks or explain topics, and students use them to display their learning. Now, every Chromebook has that feature built in. And I also absolutely love the new screen captions feature on Chrome. So live captions in Chrome generates captions for any media with audio that you play in your browser. It works across any video site, podcasts, radio content, personal video libraries such as Google Photos or Drive, and embedded video players, and most web-based video or audio chat services. So this enables students to turn on live captions for any video on any website to help them follow along. And it's great to see that the accessibility features that are built into all Chromebooks are getting some really exciting new features, such as point scanning, which is a new navigation mode for those users who need to control the cursor with their keyboard. And students who use text-to-speech can now speed up, slow down, or even pause the speech. And Chromevox now has inbuilt tutorials to help new users of this full system spoken feedback get better acquainted with the tool. So adding more accessibility features like these and making them simpler to use will really help ensure that every student and educator can make the most of their Chromebooks. I'd love now to pass to some of our education experts to gather their thoughts on some of the latest updates. So hi, Robert and Karen. I know that you've both used a lot of Chromebooks across Highlands and South Lanarkshire. Robert, maybe starting with you, any of those key features that you're most excited to see to help your educators and learners alike?
Hi, Ollie. Yeah, in Highland, we've already been making great use of third-party software for capturing screens, so that the inbuilt screen recording is going to make a massive difference. Staff in particular have become used to just simply recording, annotating a quick-fire explanation, perhaps for overcoming a digital problem or an issue, or just perhaps sending an explanation to their pupils. So the inbuilt option is excellent and much, much more readily available. So really glad to see that.
Amazing. Can't wait to hear the feedback from your educators and learners alike. And Karen, what about you? Any of these that are going to be standout impacts you see in the coming years?
Yeah, Ollie, I think the accessibility tools, that's been a huge part of the success we've had with Chromebooks, those baked-in features, and to see that being developed further is great. You know, really provides equity in education, and for teachers, it frees up their time in the class to focus on supporting learning, as opposed to having to support children to access the learning. And for the learners themselves, you know, they can really customize the experience to suit their own needs, and that really makes all learners more independent, but we know there's a core group of learners who, for them, this really means that they're not singled out as being different, and I think that's hugely powerful and really important. So delighted to see Google continue to develop those tools, and excited to see where we can take them.
It's incredible, so powerful to hear. Thank you so much for sharing. And I know we'll come back to you for more insights later, but for now I'm going to quickly pass back to AJ, who's joining us remotely. So AJ, back to you.
Thanks, Ollie. Now we're now going to be joined by Michael Conlon from XMA, who's here to discuss the transformation we're likely to see in Scotland with the recent government pledge to go one-to-one across the country. Hi, Michael. Thanks for being here with us today. My first question is, hi, Michael. My first question is, as one of the most ambitious government projects we've seen in Scotland, it's certainly leading the way in terms of, you know, the future in education. Can you please share with me your thoughts on what has driven this change in Scotland? And in your opinion, what has driven the Scottish Government to adopt this new approach?
Well, the first things first is, how unbelievably exciting is this? You know, in my 30-year teaching career, I've never been so excited about a change and a transformation that's taking place. This hasn't happened anywhere else in the UK or Europe. This is about us being incredibly bold about what we do to support young people and families. It's about a device for every child from the time they enter school to the time they leave. And I think it says an awful lot about the investment that we have in our young people. They're incredibly important to us and our future. And it's about securing that future for them in a post-Brexit and post-COVID landscape. And it's very much aligned to our understanding of what the future of work looks like in the fourth industrial revolution. So one of the first key things it's about is about equity. It's just no longer acceptable for our young people to be without, for there a gap to grow in terms of how they can access their future. That's intolerable. And COVID highlighted a lot of those things for us. And so we have, at speed, taken that on board, and we're moving forward with making that change. It's also about having a resilient education system. So, you know, if a pandemic means we have to shut down for a couple of weeks, or if there's a snow day or a snow week, you know, with the weather changing, we can just switch straight over to online learning. And because young people and staff will be in that habit of mind and that habit of behaviour, it just becomes a seamless transition. Moving on from there, there's a real economic need. In Scotland, we've got about 13,000 jobs that go unfilled every single year in the digital field. And that, again, is something we really want to address. And if we're being honest about the way the world is shaping up, we have to understand that I think it's 1 in 5 jobs in UK cities are going to change or be lost due to automation. So where are the skills development that we're going to have, not only for our young people, but for their families, in and around transforming their future? As we mentioned in there earlier about inclusion and accessibility, that's critically important. We need to empower our young people to take charge of any of the challenges that they've got. And some of them we can't get to because it's the end of the school day, or it's the weekend, or it's the holidays. It doesn't really matter what it is. We need young people to be empowered with those tools so that they take charge of how they secure that future and overcome some of the challenges that they have. But on reflection, I think the ambition that the Scottish Government have for our citizens is what it's always been about. It's about the best start in life. It's about making sure there's a pathway to a future for everybody and helping them discover themselves and the world that's around them. And you know, the technology that's there in a Chromebook is really set up perfectly to support that journey, that learner journey that we all want to have an impact on.
Thank you, Michael. And my next question is, you know, I know in your current role you've been close to several schools who've already started their digital transformation journey. What impact do you think, or do you expect this change to have in teaching and learning across Scotland?
Well, first of all, we have to get some of the pieces right. We need to get the infrastructure right. We need to get the support for professional learning right. And we're well experienced in that now across Scotland. A few bumps in the road many, many years ago, but we're now in a place where we understand the importance of the professional learning journey to support that digital transformation. So when we talk about the impact it's going to have, you're talking about communities of practice coming together to look at how we enhance learning and teaching. We look at some of the skills development that's necessary for our young people, like collaboration, like creativity. I spoke earlier about empowering young people. And when we talk to employers, and when you look at things like what the World Economic Forum are telling us about what the needs of society are going to be, it is those things. It is about collaboration and creativity. For me as a teacher and working across both primary and secondary, having that technology on a one-to-one basis means we can really acutely plan that learner journey right from primary one. So what's the journey for a young person in terms of their collaboration skills, their creativity skills, their online safety skills, their resilience in the face of some of these online issues? We can plot that really, really carefully so that our curriculum, as we've built it, really shines out to the rest of the world. So my expectation is we'll see more empowered young people, we'll see staff grow in confidence and their imagination and their own creativity being unleashed by this technology, so that it's enhancing the range of opportunities they have to teach and learn within the classroom. We've seen in some schools some very maybe not expected things happening. So for example, you'll see different clubs and societies spring up. We've seen improvements in attendance. We've seen even reductions in exclusion in some places, because technology is very much an ordinary part of a young person's life. It's relevant, it's meaningful, and it's engaging for them. So when we come to them with that technology for their learning, they meet that moment with us because that's something that's of value to them. And that's only going to improve over time.
And finally, Michael, where do you see the future of education in Scotland in the next 5 years?
Well, I think the next 5 years will have gathered an awful lot of evidence around the impact of the technology for our young people and the journey we're allowing them on. I do think we'll begin to see employers really lean into the skills that young people are coming out of school with. I think we're going to be a lighthouse for many institutions, not only here in the UK, but also across the world. We'll be an agile system. We'll be able to respond confidently with any changes that are out there. That professional learning pathway will happen, and that self-sustaining learning community will happen too. I also expect to see that for local authorities in Scotland, a lot more thinking and deep thinking about, well, when there's a device for every child and there's a device in every home, how does that help us support families and their community? So I've been working with some local authorities on some issues around to do with social care and about young carers. So we'll begin to see a positive benefit of having technology accessed by the young people, but also their families. And that could be to help develop the literacy skills of a family member or their employment opportunities. So we start casting the net wider and thinking about the societal change it can have within our local communities. I think we should absolutely lean into that really, really strongly. I think it's going to be a very, very positive future for Scotland. There's lots of learning we'll be able to share across learning communities around the world. And as I said at the very beginning, it's incredibly exciting to be part of that journey for our nation.
Thanks, Michael. That was really insightful. Just a reminder, Michael will be joining us for questions at the end of the session. So please remember, if you have any questions for Michael, please pop them into the chat. And then we can pose those questions to Michael at the end of the session. So next, from Highland Council, as previously mentioned, we've got Robert Quigley and Tanya Mackey, who will share how they transitioned to using Chrome devices with one of the largest estates we see in Scotland, currently in use at the moment. It'd be great to hear any insights they have for onboarding such a large number of devices. Robert, Tanya, it's great to speak to you today. I guess, Tanya, my first question is for yourself. Your journey with Google for Education started a few years ago. Tell us more about how you started your journey at Highland.
Hi AJ. So the Highland Council, just to put it in context, it covers a really large remote rural area. So very diverse. We've got urban areas too. So it's really important that we collaborate, and effective communication helps to bring together those school communities. So for us, way back, you mentioned, I think it was about 2015, a forward-thinking ICT strategy was agreed with the director then and the team. And that enabled that multi-million investment in Chromebooks. What that's done is put us in a position where digital has become embedded in Highland in what we do in schools. The Connecting Scotland grant has further enabled us that capacity. So we're now looking at, we've always had a one-to-one model of Chromebooks from P6 all the way through to S6. We've got a further about 103 primary schools that have actually got one-to-one additional capacity, plus more. So I think it's about over 32,000 Chromebooks now on our console. So the ICT and Learning Team, AJ, was formed last March, really from officers at the centre who were already involved in digital development and ICT. But what it's done, it's brought together that consistency of support. So we can be really responsive to our schools, our community, supporting digital inclusion. And we've delivered a raft of professional learning to help upskill our professionals and also our parents, carers and pupils, which was really important all the way through the last 18 months. So there's a lot of schools demonstrating high levels of innovation, and I think their use of digital technologies is definitely being recognised nationally.
Thank you, Tanya. And Robert, it's great to see the rollout of such a large number of devices at that scale. Tell me a bit more about how you managed it. It can't have been easy.
Hi AJ, yeah, thanks for that question. And as Tanya said, with such a vast number of devices rolled out across Highland, I think the most important thing for us is the fact that we have our own tenancy with Google. And what that gives us is that complete flexibility. It allows us to make decisions at local and Highland-wide level. So a good example being that we can, because of the way we've organised our organisational units, our OUs, we can push out, for instance, apps to certain schools. We can turn on Gmail for secondary pupils, but turn it off for primary. So that flexibility has been absolutely huge in allowing us to respond to the individual needs of schools. Another really key part was that we had a model in place that empowered schools to identify a digital leader. So somebody that was trained initially in both digital learning and online safety. And the idea of this was that this person would then cascade their knowledge to support their school. And this might involve them actually delivering the training, but it could also involve coming back to us, knowing their school and saying to us, can we support them? So that, I suppose, ownership of digital learning across an individual school. And then finally, I think another really practical part that has made a huge difference has been establishing what we've called a break fix team. And that's basically a team that when a device is broken or has been damaged, we'll take that device, we'll try to fix it, we'll try to recycle parts from it, but most importantly, they will pass out a device to the school so that in effect, as much as possible, a pupil is never left without a device. So that one-to-one model continues. So that break fix team is a hugely important part of the rollout as well.
Thanks, Robert. And again, for yourself, Robert, Highland Council was on their digital journey long before 2020. Tell me, how has the use of digital tools supported you due to the varying needs of students across Highland, both pre and post-pandemic?
So prior to COVID, digital tools were being used without question, and they were being used well in pockets, but perhaps not consistently. And I don't think you would say that they were embedded into the curriculum. But as the different lockdowns arrived, pupil and staff skill sets were hugely developed further. And the emphasis, as Tanya's already mentioned, has been upon consistency across all Highland schools. This was done primarily through a fairly significant programme of training, which was pitched at different levels of expertise and confidence, and also crucially for both teaching and non-teaching staff. We wanted to make sure that we took along not only teachers, but also non-teaching staff so that they could support pupils during any lockdown periods and also when they come back to school physically. A really powerful part of this training was the fact it was delivered by volunteer teachers, well over 50 full-time class teachers who felt empowered to offer their services. A number of key digital tools, particularly I would have to highlight during the various lockdowns, have been things like Google Meet. Because of the structure we had in place, because of the fact that we've been on this journey for quite some time, Google Meet was turned on from day one. So staff were able to engage with their pupils. Jamboard was used really effectively for collaborative learning. A Google endorsed app like Book Creator has become really powerful for showcasing learning. And good old Google Sites has been used fantastically well across schools for whole school websites, for class sites, for individual profiling. And for the council, we created what we called our Digital School Hub, which was a huge digital platform where all our training resources, including recordings of every single session we ever ran, were uploaded. And this is a front-facing site that can be accessed by pupils, by parents, by staff. So it's been really, really well used. And we also created a site called This is Highland, which is a Google site. And that was just used simply for showcasing good examples of success. So during lockdown, things that were happening both digitally, but also just in the local community as well. And the final thing that I think has made the biggest difference is that we introduced a digital skills progression. We felt it was really important that how we would be able to help schools to actually plan progressive and a robust programme was to provide this digital skills progression. It's got measurable benchmarks for staff so they can actually start to see where pupil progress is starting to happen.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks for putting that into perspective. And it's great to hear how Google tools and even Chrome devices are an integral part of the great work that you're doing at Highland. Now, finally, Tanya, what does the future hold for education in Highland Council?
Well, it's really exciting, AJ. We agreed our digital strategy for education way back January, February time with the council. But currently the Highland Council is working on designing and implementing a roadmap for digital transformation. So that's talking about creating one digital strategy across all services, and that accelerated digital pedagogy that we've seen in schools, that digital skill set and flexibility are going to be key values which we incorporate. Really ambitious, exciting, and it's got the potential to reach whole communities, and that continued investment in digital inclusion for our young people and skill-based learning. Those flexible ways to learn, to achieve, to study, virtual effective mentoring, it does make a difference to our young people. So I see that future with the digital agenda at heart, attainment and achievement, and that anything we do to improve the improved use of data, assistive technologies, collaborative platforms, and just that improved pedagogy. That's going to just add more value and hopefully improved outcomes for our young people across our authority.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Robert. It was great to hear about the great work you've done in the past and your plans for the future. Remember, everybody, Tanya and Robert will still be with us towards the end. So if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them into the live chat. Next, I'd like to move over to Karen McLeod from South Lanarkshire Council and Ian Vosser, who's joining us from Tablet Academy. Both Karen and Ian were both involved with the deployment of Chromebooks and Google Workspace for Education across South Lanarkshire Council back in 2015. And the continued success that they've had in South Lanarkshire Council in upskilling their key educators via Google for Education certifications has been a major part of the work that they've done in the past and the work they'll be doing in the future. I'd like to start by asking Karen a question, if you don't mind. Karen, it's good to speak to you today. Do you mind telling me more about the digital journey you've been on in South Lanarkshire?
Yeah, Adrian, great to have an opportunity to share this with everyone. Our story starts in 2015 when we discovered two things, Chromebooks and, as it was called then, Google Apps for Education. And it was kind of born out of our need to provide a better solution in terms of mobile devices for our over 160 establishments across the local authority. And so we kicked off with a pilot of 20 Chromebooks in Straven Academy in January 2016. And fast forward to today, and we now have over 14,000 devices deployed across the local authority. So we've had a huge success with that the devices just worked. And what we then thought was, well, what can we really do to achieve any kind of transformation in terms of learning and teaching, because effectively giving someone a device doesn't achieve that. And that's really then where, as it then became G Suite, came into its own. And we felt we really had to raise awareness of what can be done with these devices and also across other devices in the local authority. So we held a series of large-scale roadshow events in conjunction with yourselves, Google, and our managed service provider, RM. And they were really successful in starting to engage our teaching staff and support staff as well. But we did see that we were attracting the early adopters and the ed tech enthusiasts. And to achieve meaningful and sustainable change, we knew we had to reach that middle majority that are always a wee bit more tricky to engage early on in these things. So we decided in May, I think it was 2019, to hold a whole week of events that were focused around the Google tools, and that coincided with the National Digital Learning Week. And so again, in partnership with Google, we hosted a whole series of events across the whole week. But that was not just in person. So we did have these events across a number of our schools, but it was also online, simultaneously happening. So yes, pre-COVID, we were doing what has now become almost the norm. And what that did was it meant we could reach far more staff. And it was at this time that Ian Vosser came on board with us. Ian was one of our really successful faculty heads in one of our largest secondary schools. And he had also just successfully achieved Google Reference School status for that school and was on his journey to becoming a Google Innovator as well. So we knew that Ian could help us realise that goal that we had of achieving scale across the local authority when it came to developing staff. And it was from that our Google Educator programme was born.
Great. So Ian, can you tell me more about how you're able to scale your staff training?
So as Karen said, I've been part of the Google for Education Innovator Academy, and that gave me a really exciting idea of how can we get more teachers feeling engaged and excited about professional learning, and happy to spread that. And as Karen said, with over 160 establishments, all the way from those early years right up to secondary schools, you're wanting to make sure that every learning community has that opportunity to be able to engage with good quality professional development that's going to help with the rollout of the digital learning and in particular the Chromebook devices. So cohort 1 happened between September and December 2019. And that was an in-person training where people went through their Certified Educator Level 1 and Level 2, and a group of 22 individuals went through to getting their trainer status. And it was those individuals who went to get onto their trainer status who have really driven the program from there. So from small beginnings of having 4 days together over a space of 3 months in person with some development time in between, then working with staff groups, we then had a really confident group of trainers who felt really excited to spread their message in all areas of South Lanarkshire and across all sectors as well. And it not just working with teachers, but also working with support colleagues across the schools and clusters. So what we did when COVID hit, we were keen for a second cohort, but we weren't able to do that in person. So that went to an exclusively online delivery, and over 300 people engaged with the online training. And it was great to see South Lanarkshire Council, with the trainers that were in-house, they were able to deliver a lot of that training for level 1 and level 2. And Tablet Academy Scotland was able to come in and provide additional support through the trainer pathways that are available for the training there. So that worked really nicely. I'm really excited about looking forward to what might be coming up in the future, but I won't touch on that just yet. I'm sure Karen will in a minute.
Great, thank you. And Karen, so what impact has the training programme had on teaching and learning in your local authority?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that the immediate impact was the kind of numbers that we managed to get through the certification. So our level 1 educators, we now have 180, just over 180 level 1 educators in South Lanarkshire. We have over 100 level 2 educators, and these people are the ones who are the boots on the ground. They're supporting the learners, they're supporting the staff around them as well. And as Ian said, you know, we now have 38 people who have been trained as trainers, and the vast majority of them are almost through their certification. We've got a wee handful just to get over the last hurdle, but they're well on their way. And I think it's fair to say that the sort of feedback and recognition that core team of trainers have had in terms of what they've delivered for the local authority has been overwhelmingly positive. They hosted hours of training via webinars over the last year or so and reached literally thousands of staff. And they also themselves have developed hugely. So some of the testimonies from these trainers have been things like, you know, I actually managed to achieve a promotion through some of the work that I had done through this programme, and that's because it had given them a confidence that perhaps they didn't have before. And also they felt braver to try new things, and that percolates down to their learners and, as I say, the staff around them that they support, as well as those within the local authority and beyond the local authority that a number of them are now working with. And another impact we've seen is from head teachers contacting me to say they've seen the power of this programme in their classrooms, and so they're looking to now take whole cohorts of their staff through the training, and that means we're going to have to approach that slightly differently perhaps in terms of how we deliver that, but that's a really exciting challenge to have to look at. But also in terms of, at the end of the day, this comes down to the impact on learners, and in terms of usage, at the peak we were seeing over 40,000 classroom users active, as well as about 11,500 at the peak of active classrooms. Now, granted, that has fallen back a little since we returned to face-to-face teaching, but not significantly. So I think we can see we've got momentum has built, and we want to continue with that. And I would say that, again, another impact of it that we're seeing is that there's a huge appetite out there still for this. I already have a waiting list for cohort 3, and excited to see where we can take that in the future.
Thank you, Karen. It's great to hear about the journey that you've been on. And I guess finally, Karen, you know, what does the future hold with digital education in South Lanarkshire Council?
Well, yeah, I think the immediate thing is we'll definitely get that cohort 3 group up and running. That's due to kick off towards the end of October, and we will most definitely be continuing on with the Google Educator programme, because it has been such a big success, and that is what is underpinning a lot of the work that's going on in our classrooms with our learners. The trainers and the other educators who are still keen to make an offering to staff across the local authority have agreed that we want to move towards more of a pedagogical approach. So looking at how we can improve pedagogy, which is underpinned by the use of digital tools. So that's going to be a big part of our focus this year as well. We're really excited and waiting very patiently to see what the Scottish Government's offering of the one-to-one device programme is going to look like. But we are absolutely ready to embrace that opportunity. But again, as I said at the beginning, our journey started with Chromebooks, but we quickly realised that it needed to be about more than a device, and that's what we want to focus on. So excited to see where that can take us. We want to make sure that we provide teachers and students and support staff with really high quality digital tools that are safe to use and intuitive to use, but that it's all underpinned by good sound digital pedagogy as well. And the last thing I just want to share with you, because I'm super excited about this, is that we hope to launch in January 2022 our SLC Google Coach programme. We currently already have a number of staff, I think we've got about 5 staff who are going through the coaching programme with Tablet Academy Scotland under the tutelage of Ian Vosser, and they're nearing the end of that training, and we hope to then roll that out across the authority on a bigger scale. And we've got a strong culture of coaching in South Lanarkshire as it is, but this is going to be really interesting to see how we marry together our traditional coaching culture with an ed tech coaching culture, and really excited to see where that can go. And all of that is about supporting the staff to then help them deliver more effective teaching and learning in this new environment that we've all found ourselves in.
Thank you, Karen. That was really insightful. And what's really interesting is, as you were sharing, your journey, the story of your journey, and what your plans are for the future, Linda in the live chat has just mentioned that she completed a level 1 educator qualification with yourself, Karen, and she's actually been sharing her learning with staff recently at her school. So, what a great example. Great to hear about the great work that both Ian and yourself have completed at South Lanarkshire Council. And, I will continue to work with you and continue to watch the space and see where you'll be in the future. So it's super exciting. I'm glad to have you here to talk about the journey that you've been on and your plans for the future. Okay, so I would like to now invite all our speakers back to the stage to answer any questions you may have. Please remember, if you do have any questions, please submit them in the chat. We'll be happy to address them with all our speakers that we have today. And also, I want to say thank you to everybody who pre-submitted questions to our panel. I'll hand you back now to Dean in the studio, who will be able to take us through some of the questions that we've had pre-submitted.
Thanks, AJ. It was really great to hear about the journeys of both South Lanarkshire and the Highlands. And as AJ said, we're going to bring all of our speakers back here now for the final section of today's event, which is also your chance to ask questions you might have for anyone here. So whether it's a question for Ollie about upcoming features, or one to find out more about those stories you just heard, please leave it in the live chat now and we'll come to it shortly. Thanks to those of you that have already done that, and we'll come to those that have already been submitted in a moment too. Just a quick one to start off. You've all achieved amazing things in your respective local authorities as you've been working there. Ian, I just want to ask you a quick question about certifications. There's been a really clear focus on working towards the certified educator qualifications, certified trainer, and Karen there just mentioned certified coach as well. Is there a reason that you work towards those specifically rather than just offer training?
I think the quality of training is obviously really important. And by giving people certification at the end, they go through this examination process for level 1 and level 2. Coach and trainer are a bit more portfolio based. People get a real sense of achievement out of that. But by doing it in groups, so we call them cohorts, and those cohorts ranged from 15 to 30 people. By doing it in those groups, it really helped establish community as well. So if people are thinking about going out and completing the certifications for themselves, and I say absolutely crack on and do that, I think that's a really fantastic opportunity. But if you can find other people to do your certification with, you find that you'll build yourself a community of support, and you'll have someone to share ideas with and be able to grow your confidence together and maybe discuss and try things out. It just might help you be bolder than you might otherwise be. And I think, in terms of having a value and making yourself stand out, being a Google for Education certified educator, trainer or coach is a really exciting thing to do. So strongly encouraging formal certification.
Absolutely. And actually, it looks like we've got a related live question that's come through on the chat. So AJ, over to you.
Thank you, Dean. We've got a question from Callum, and he's asking, many teachers moving from Microsoft over to our Google platform, it can be a challenge. Do you have any suggestions on how to manage this change to Workspace, showing that it's a positive move? And I'd probably say that's best to be directed at Karen from South Lanarkshire.
I would say, to be fair, we've never pinned staff down to one or the other. So it depends, I suppose, Callum, on what approach your local authority is taking, or your school perhaps, and maybe it's even within a department that I can understand why people would say you have to go one way or the other, because it perhaps just makes the training of staff that little bit more simplistic. I would say learners don't necessarily have a problem with that. They can tend to switch between them with relative ease. So it's not something I would say we've found a huge challenge. We have some staff who will use Google, some staff who will use Microsoft, and some staff who will use both. And as I say, we've never pinned people down. It just so happens that I think the vast majority of our staff have gravitated more towards the Google tools, perhaps because of the adoption of our Chromebooks and how that just works so seamlessly with it. But I think with any kind of skilling up of staff, it's really about finding out where the need is and developing some sort of program around that to help them if it is making a transition from one to the other. But what I would also say is that what has made a huge difference, I think, or did make a huge difference to us at the time when we started to adopt a digital approach to learning and teaching, was that the tools have become so much more intuitive. And, if all else fails, people can usually Google and get the answer. So I don't know if that's of help or not, but genuinely, I do think that the tools have made a big difference here. And there's certainly lots of support online that the staff can access to.
I think that's a great answer. Thanks, Karen. I think that's one of the benefits of using Glow, right? Is that you get access to all of these different platforms in one place and you're signed in automatically. I really love what you said about being able to use both. And the way I tend to think about it is we really want to give students the skills that they need to succeed in maybe whether that's creating presentations or working with spreadsheets, regardless of the tools that might be put in front of them. So as things change over time, they feel ready as well. We've got a bit more of a product-focused question, so we're going to hand over to Ollie quickly in the studio. Dale's asking if we can give any hints of any future features coming to Workspace or Chrome.
It's a great question, Dina. Thank you, Dale, for the question. We get a lot of questions like this, Dean, as you know. I'm a big Google Sites fan. I think it's an incredible tool for both educators, learners, and school communities. I'm really excited about some of the updates around things like custom templates, the ability for educators to give comments in Google Sites, and also the Sites API. I think it's going to be amazing to have the ability to bulk create and manage an entire classes of Google Sites from one central spreadsheet or application. Also, I think that more and more schools are asking for deeper kind of engagement analytics and insights into how their users are using these tools. So some really great things we're introducing down the line is the Classroom Engagement Report. So teachers and educators will be able to see really easily how their students interacting with Google Classroom, whether that be posts, comments, assignments, submissions, etc. Really excited to see these land in the hands of educators very soon.
Nice. And any for Chrome?
There's some really good ones coming on Chrome. Some of the accessibility features that I've just mentioned. Dean, I don't know if you've got a few your favourite. We were talking just offline before.
No, I think in general what's really interesting for me is I think as we think about the future and as Ollie's talking about some of these features, it's really about being more assistive. So being assistive is just making something easier to use or more intuitive for the end user. And that's certainly the direction I see us heading. So no specifics that I can share just yet, but I'm really excited for the future of our products. Now, earlier on in the chat, there was a note about working with early years students and remembering that early years students are picking up their digital skills at that level as well. Robert, I know that you have done a lot of work with families as a whole and working with younger students with devices as well. Perhaps you can share some more about that.
Yeah, certainly. Probably a kind of a first step that we did in Highland particularly was to do some reassurance around giving a one-to-one device to early years pupils, because in most cases this will be their first ever laptop, first ever computer. So there was an anxiety amongst parents of, what are we doing? How can we give these devices to pupils so young? So one of my roles has been to deliver a really sort of robust and detailed online safety program across all Highland schools to prepare parents, to prepare children, to prepare staff for what to do when children inevitably come across something on a device that they're not comfortable with. So that was really important, to give that parents the reassurance that not only are the pupils as safe as they possibly can be, but also the devices. We installed various products that allowed for the filtering to happen. We've got things like Chromebook agreements that are quite tight in terms of what the expectations are. So the reassurance was really important. And then once we got past that point, I think the next thing that was really important was something that I've already mentioned, which is the digital skills progression. It's saying to staff, you don't have to just make up something that you can use these devices with, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. Use the digital skills progression to actually pick out the targeted skills that you want to develop, and also then looking at how we can support the staff to deliver those actual skills. So rather than it being about simply, if you like, playing with devices or playing with tools, it's putting a context to it. You want to use something in the early years, this is what you can do with it. So whether it's the very early introduction to coding, whether it's using some of the sort of Google Docs for early stages of collaborative work, using something like Book Creator. So it's really just about being supporting staff, but using that model that we've had from the very start, which is that staff within a school are empowered to lead the digital learning and to come to our team for support where that's needed.
That's a great answer. And one thing to remember in doing any of this kind of work with younger students is that safeguarding has to be at the core of what we do in the same way it is when we're working in an analog, traditional situation in a classroom too. Ollie, one of the recent updates that we've announced is age-based access. I wonder if you want to just share a little bit more about that.
Great, I'd be happy to. So as you may be aware, the UK just recently introduced the Age-Appropriate Design Code, which is a really great piece of advice and legislation for technical companies to make sure that users, particularly under 18 users, are having an age-appropriate use of services when they're online. So we at Google have implemented this globally now. And one way that you and your users might start seeing this is around our additional services. So things like YouTube. If you're an under 18 user with access to YouTube through your Workspace for Education account, you now won't be able to do things like upload videos, create a channel. You also won't be able to comment or view comments or chat across the service. And there's a number of changes which we've outlined on a support article, which we can make sure we follow up on the chat, which outlines how we're abiding to these really great age-based, more appropriate design practices for our younger users.
Great. Thanks, Ollie. A really important topic as well. I'm going to come across to Tanya now. Tanya, you've been using one-to-one devices in the Highlands for a long time, and I'm just wondering what it looks like when you have new members of staff starting. How do you make sure that those people new to this kind of environment are able to get started?
Okay, so I know that there's been a huge amount of training for our staff throughout the various lockdowns, but we continue to work with NQTs and probationer teachers to make sure that they're also understanding. We've got both systems, we've got Google and we've got other products that we use. We have also something called the Digital Schools Hub, which is an open site. So it's not just our staff that we're supporting, it's our new parents, our parents and carers in Highland, our pupils. And we have used Google Meet to kind of record the training as we go along. So there's a whole bank of resources. And as I say, we've got a fairly responsive system in place. So we can also work with our associated school groups, so in different cohorts, to support there across the schools. And we just keep looking at ways to, I guess, improve our use of digital technology and focus on learning outcomes, because it's not always just about the device and the tools, it's really about how we can use them to enhance our learning and teaching.
Absolutely. I think that's got to be at the core of any kind of work happening, right? It's not putting a device into students' hands isn't going to change anything. It's always got to be focused on what's the outcome going to be, how we're going to improve the outcomes at the end. All right, we've got time, I think, just for one last question. And we've talked a lot today about teachers and those in the classroom and the training they might receive. We've had a question in from Dale on the chat, which we're going to hand over to Ollie. Dale's asking about the Chrome OS Administrator certification. So like we have educator certifications, there are also some for admins as well. It's offline right now, so wondering if there's going to be anything else replacing it soon.
Great, Dale. Perfect timing as well. So I had an email about this just a few minutes before I joined here for the session with you all today. Essentially, we've redesigned and going through a process to make sure it's a really robust experience for both our enterprise and education admins. So we're redesigning the scenarios and questions around it. Watch this space. You should hear more announcement to your primary admins very, very soon with more details around that certification. Great question.
All right, you answered that nice and quickly. So I'm gonna jump in and do one very final question for Michael this time. Michael, your work now is taking you across multiple local authorities, and some of them watching today may be relatively early on in the journey compared to those that we've heard about. I'm wondering what your kind of main piece of advice for them would be as they're moving forward with the use of technology, especially with the new news from the government.
I think what I would ask them to do is to think, what do you want learning to look like for your young people? What are your ambitions for your young people? How have you spoken to your community of practice around what their ambitions are? And then lean into the practice that you see across Scotland. You know, go see South Lanarkshire, go up to Highland, talk to people about what it is that made the difference for young people and for teachers. And so much of that is really to do with, you know, things like, for Chromebook in particular, just that simplicity, the simplicity and the security that's built in right from the get-go, that means you can show young people different ways of being creative, different ways of being curious. And it's an understanding that Google have had for a long time, is that the world is in the cloud now. And so there's no need for you to be downloading big, hefty, massive applications. You can go to the cloud and engage in some really rich experiences for young people, and that leaves smiles on their faces when they walk out the classroom, and that they continue when they go home. They continue that learner journey because of that. They continue that learner journey because of the simplicity, the security, and the creative experiences that they get to engage with. So spend some time talking to people like myself, to colleagues who work across Scotland using Google products, and really set that ambition to be really, really high, because your young people will benefit from it, you'll benefit from it, and your communities will too.
Thanks, Michael. Really powerful note to end on there. And just once again, thank you all from me for joining us today. It's been great to learn about your insights. And I'm going to hand back over to AJ to close off the event for us today.
Thank you, Dean. Firstly, I'd like to thank all of our guests who've taken the time to be here with us today. And thank you all for joining us. I hope you agree it was really interesting to hear from some of our guests. From the exciting changes that we have on the horizon in Scotland, to bridging the digital divide while empowering learners with inclusive learning and ultimately improving learning outcomes. It was also great to hear about the great work done by local education authorities to support both the educators and the learners across the country. Also, thank you, Dean and Ollie, for providing fantastic product updates, and they will be at your fingertips soon in the future. Please continue to check the Scottish Google for Education webpage for further information on upcoming product releases and any further news on personal development events that we have coming up. Finally, I'd like to say a big thank you to our events team for putting on a slightly different type of event to what we've been used to in the last 18 months. Still gutted I was unable to be in the studio, but looked absolutely fantastic, and I hope you all enjoyed the event. I'd also like to give a special shout out to Dean and Ollie for covering the studio in my absence, and it was great to hear the product updates that you were able to share and some of the great questions that you were able to pose to our guests. We'll be sharing a feedback form with you all shortly, so it'll be great to hear what you found insightful and also what you found inspiring. Any feedback that you provide us will help us improve any future events that we have in the future. Finally, I'd like to say I've really enjoyed being here today, and hopefully I look forward to meeting you all in person in the near future. Thank you very much, everybody. and goodbye from Google for Education.